Everybody, welcome to the Anything But Typical podcast, where we have real conversations on leadership, growth, and what it actually takes to build a business that works. Yes, we've got two Bens in the house today. And McDonald, who's been here since the get-go, 6+ years ago.
That's
Congratulations. Right. It's been fun with you. And
sure.
Ben Kinney, the publisher of Business North Carolina. Which is, we got lots of fun stuff to talk about on that. But Ben, it's really great to have you. Ben, it's always great to have you.
Appreciate you not excluding me. I feel good.
I don't want you to feel excluded.
I was going to walk out, but I won't.
That's it. So, Ben Kinney, you are a runner, which is awesome. And we were just talking before we went on the record that we were both at the Cooper River Bridge run at the same time when Bill Murray was the starter.
That's right.
Walking around in his "What's Up, Chuck" t-shirt, and he's talking about hoping everybody had a big breakfast. He's funny. So anyway, but you're back at the Cooper River Bridge run again, which is coming up here.
Yeah, I'm not ready for that one.
Come on, man.
I know.
Next year, the three of us can all do it
Let's
together.
do it. Yeah, 1 year.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, it's a great race.
But the scenario is you are showing up in Mount Pleasant. You're in the throng of people. I mean, it's thousands and tens of thousands of people. And somebody recognizes you while the bands are playing and everything. But they're talking about you. Oh, that's Ben Kinney from Charlotte. And they don't realize that you can overhear everything that they're saying about you and understand it. What would you want somebody to say about you?
He knows a lot of folks. He's got a great sense of humor, and he really can connect people. That's what I would think. Yeah, that's what I would hope. But most likely, they're probably like, that guy's got a really big mouth. He talks a lot.
And you're in communications, so it kind of works.
That's right. Without a doubt, for
You
sure.
were born for it.
Yeah, without a doubt. And like I said, it probably has how I grew up and things like that as well. So I had to have the gift of gab.
Well, we want to dive into that.
We sure do. For the listeners, Gary already mentioned the publisher of Business North Carolina, but also the publisher of SouthPark. Geez, I can't talk. We did one earlier today, so I'm going to blame it on that. Publisher of SouthPark Magazine and publisher of North Carolina Tribune.
Yes.
And then you coach on the side, and you're just a busy guy, right? So let's go back to that comment of kind of how you were raised and your upbringing of how it led to gift of gab, being able to communicate, things like that. What did you mean by that?
Well, growing up, so my parents, and Gary, we talked about this a little bit, is my parents were very young when they had me, like 1920.
Okay.
This was back in 1969, and they were also kind of on the hippie side of things as well. So I always like to talk about myself growing up as my parents and I grew up together, and my little sister, who's 2 years younger than I am. But we all kind of grew up together. I mean, when you're 20 years old, you're still have plenty of time to grow up, right? So it was, and my dad was also a reporter. And I was born in Burlington, North Carolina, and he was a reporter for the local paper in Burlington. And being the son of a journalist and being a journalist kid, interesting thing is that it was almost like being an Army brat. You know, back in the day when that was a totally different job than it is now, you went where the work was. You know, I think a lot of folks did that, but especially in journalism because each one was a kind of a step up and better opportunity.
Yep.
So during that time, my parents lived in Burlington for a while, and then we moved to Winston-Salem because my dad got a job at the Winston-Salem Journal for a while. He pretty talented editor, pretty talented reporter, and got offered a scholarship to the Columbia University, and what's called a Badgett Fellowship, which was journalistic business journalism.
Yep.
And went up there for a year. And my mom was living in Winston-Salem with us too. She was a school teacher, and she basically said, "You're taking one of these kids with you up there." And I don't know what that meant, but anyway, so it was me that had to go up to New York City. So I went to New York City and for a semester in 1980, and lived with my dad while he was attending Columbia University. Wow. And so that was really interesting. And one of the things when we talk about the gift of gab is I had to be, had to learn how to talk to people and communicate and all that kind of stuff. And especially, but having a Southern accent proved a little iffy. People, when I open up my mouth, they're like, what's coming out of your mouth? Essentially,
New Yorkers being judgmental.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't believe it. But yeah, I went to PS 125 outside of Harlem, and it was fun, but it was a learning experience.
I bet.
So I really had to learn how to communicate and become friendly and all that kind of stuff. Fast forward, we moved back to Winston-Salem, and he immediately got a job at the Miami Herald to be an editor for the Broward Bureau in South Florida.
Wow.
So we moved the entire family down to South Florida, which was another experience that was very interesting. Just total melting pot. And during that time period, I attended a lot of different schools. And I've always thought about this. I don't know if you guys ever do this. You ever kind of like, maybe if you're trying to go to sleep at night, you look back at certain year, you go, what year was that when I was in fifth grade or sixth grade?
Yeah.
Kind of doing that. So I do that a lot because I've been to so many different places. And so even in North Carolina, I went to a bunch of different schools because kind of magnet schools and things like that. And down in Florida, it was no different. We moved in one place and then we had to move to another place, and school districts were changing all the time back during that time period. And so I probably went to by the time I was like in ninth grade, I probably went to about 7 different schools.
Wow.
So that created the new kid. I was always the new kid at every school. Remember the new kid at every school? Somebody would show up and he was either despised or everybody wanted to be his friend or something. It's one or the other, right? So I really had to learn how to assimilate and get along with people and just kind of, just make friends. I was pretty social that way. And so I did that. And that's kind of helped me out to where I am today. Fast forward, 1985, my dad he moved up to Charlotte to work for, very quickly, Charlotte Magazine. That didn't work out, but he got offered a job to work at Business North Carolina, which was it started in 1981, a statewide business publication. He became an editor, executive editor, or editor-in-chief, excuse me, and then on down the line, he became publisher and later a co-owner of it as well. But we came up with him, so we had to live we lived in South Charlotte, which I'd never lived at before. Right back to it, man. Yep. The only thing that stunk about that was back in South Florida, high school was 9th grade, and I was in 9th grade, which you were a freshman, right?
Right.
I went to East Meck High School in Charlotte, and East Meck was where you started. So I was like, man, I'm a freshman starting off here. I'm going to be a sophomore, which is almost like being a freshman again. You know what I mean? So so that was probably the hardest time adapting was when I moved here to Charlotte. It was just a different suburban, kind of easygoing stuff that people had lived there all their lives and such. And I never really lived in like a real traditional place. You know what I mean? In terms of that. Yeah, they're all so different as well, except for I guess back in Winston-Salem, but that was a long time ago. But anyway, so I think that kind of helped me adapt and talk to people and learn about different folks and listen a little bit and, kind of gauge on where people are coming from before you kind of just outright, as well.
When you saw your father's career, right, you're literally moving along with it as he progresses and gets into different roles. Was there an interest and attraction to that industry at the time, or did that develop for you later?
Not at all. I fell into it. I went to NC State.
It was to study history or something.
To study history. I was going to be a high school history teacher. I was going to follow my mom's footsteps. She was a great teacher, chemistry, physics, those things. As a matter of fact, she went to a lot of different high schools in Charlotte. And at the time when I was in high school at East Meck, she was there as well, which was a kind of a double-edged sword.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
she was cool though. She was cool.
You get to start again as a second-year freshman, and your mom's there.
Your mom's there. Without a doubt.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong?
Luckily, you had lots of practice going from one to the next to the next.
Yeah, true that. But the weird thing was I was just so paranoid about her. I didn't know what kind of teacher she was, right? So I didn't want to go there and her just be like the worst, teacher and meanest lady in the world and such. Luckily, she wasn't. She was really cool, and a lot of folks came to me and told me that. And East Meck at the time was so big; it was almost, it really wasn't that big a factor. But I was going to do that, so I wanted to teach, and I was really I'd love to do this. I love history. This would be great. And so I went to NC State, and for 4.5 years, that's what I was going to be, was an educator. Unfortunately, I went and student taught for 6 months, and man, I was like, this is not for me.
Really?
Yeah, it was just a couple of things. It was. I love teachers. I think they hardest working people, and I really have to say they don't get the respect they deserve tenfold. Yeah. But for me, what the problem was I'm not an early riser, and high school was like. And I student taught, so I lived in Raleigh, and the gig that they gave me was Northern Durham High School, which is a pretty tough high school, but it's also like 45 minutes to an hour away. So it wasn't, and we had to be there at like 6:15 in the morning. I said that's isn't good. But also the thing was, you really had to prepare every day for a lesson. If you're going to be a good teacher, you had to put it in. You put the blood, sweat, and tears in, and really. Plan ahead and do, and just for all that at the time, it wasn't for me. But I didn't drop it. What ended up happening was I had a part-time job at the News and Observer, the big newspaper in Raleigh, and I worked part-time in kind of a newspapers and education program there. And I graduated in December of '92, and there was no teacher jobs available because it was the middle of the semester, right? So for 6 months, I decided I was going to do just something full time that I could do, and I went into sales. So classified advertising in 1992 for the News and Observer. And Ben, I know you're probably too young to understand this. I'm just kidding.
That was going out as I was starting to recollect.
Right. Gary, you know.
Oh yeah, I definitely know.
This is when the internet was just starting. I mean, things were just really getting on, and the newspaper was a cash cow. And classified advertising, think about
big
this.
Time.
Yeah. Real estate, recruitment, automotive, all those things. That's the only place you could, sell your car or sell whatever.
Oh yeah.
And so that was just there were times when the Sunday News and Observer was two like bundles of paper.
Right.
One was just the news, sports, and all that kind of good stuff. The other was just classified advertising.
Yeah.
So I sold that. I was on the phone, total telecommunications, taking orders, upselling, and all that kind of stuff. And it turned out I was pretty good at it. You know what I mean? I hit a lot of sales goals and won some sales contests and won some awards and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed doing it. And with sales, there was money to be made.
True.
And so I just kind of progressed in a career in advertising sales for the N&O. I went to sell display advertising, which were the nice things, and did business-to-business sales for the group, and really worked hard. And it was just a good gig. So I ended up in that type of business. But we were what my dad would call the dark side, because it was advertising, right?
Oh yeah.
Back in the day, editors and editorial.
They tolerated them.
Never even talked to them.
Yeah.
And we were on a different floor at the
yeah.
paper. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it was just interesting how those things occurred. But eventually how it ended up is I went to work in Raleigh as a sales rep for BNC for my dad. Loved being able to do that because I could stay in, away from him, and kind of like, I don't know how that's going to work.
Yep.
But I just loved it, my dad. So it worked out really well. And eventually, we moved down to Raleigh. My wife, I was married, and we moved down to Raleigh and became general manager and then publisher of it.
I'm curious how your transition went into that part of this industry, right? So you go the history and education route, then you're in sales, and now all of a sudden you're on the other side. You say you go from the dark side to the light side, right? So what did that transition look like? Because all of those are different skill sets.
Then it was fast and furious, and I'll tell you why. I had a good life in Raleigh. We had a great house, in a nice neighborhood there, and my wife and I have been married for a couple of years and such. We were just getting ready to have our first kid. This is right after 9/11. My dad gives me a call early on Sunday morning and says, I got some terrible news. His general manager, who was also a CPA, was also a controller, for the magazine. Her and her husband died in a plane crash because they had a little Cessna that her husband owned. He worked for B of A. They crashed like on Sunday morning when they're coming back from their, like I think a funeral in Arkansas or something like that. So craziness. And I'd been working for BNC for about a year and a half, and he said, we talked to the board. They want you to come down. You're going to take over as general manager and essentially, do this, whether you like it or not. And I was like, oh, great.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay, well, I guess I got to do it. Duty calls, right? Yeah. I went down there, and a couple things happened. One is I had to become general manager, which means I immediately became my sales manager's boss, right?
Right.
Which was a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, had to
A
leave.
little younger.
You're right.
Right.
We go down. This was December of 2000 and 2001. The general manager had not finished payroll. The general manager had not closed up the fourth quarter of the year.
Oh, wow.
I'm a history major. I could barely,
Wow.
not an accountant. And so we scrambled to get everything right. And plus, and I'll tell you, this lady was like the heart of the magazine.
Yeah.
So everybody was just shell shocked and crying, and it was just a really tough time. So I went down there. We got everything fixed. I mean, we didn't fix everything, but we got everything stabilized. And I learned on the job. It was trial by fire. It was trial by volcanic fire, without a doubt. Mm. So, and let's throw in the mix that my dad was pretty harsh critic. And we always called Business North Carolina, my sister-in-law, we call him baby brother, because Dad was always taking care of baby brother and paying attention to him and stuff like that, and treating him. And so, we came down, and I'm coming down and trying to make some business decisions and things like that. So there's your family business, clashes without going to some mediator or something like that, like a lot of people do, or it was just down there. So it was tough. We learned a lot about each other, and I don't know if I mentioned this to you, Gary, but it's not very funny, but the first 3 or 4 months I was there, I didn't have anywhere to live. So I would drive down during the week and stay at Mom and Dad's house. And
oh, wow, yeah.
31-year-old man and hanging with Mom and Dad. So it also turned out my little sister was working at my mom's high school as well. She was a high school teacher, and she was living at home.
Oh, wow.
So you can imagine how interesting it was for us to be living in our childhood home with our parents who were probably in their late or mid to late 50s, and my sister and I who were in our 30s, or no, excuse me, they were in their early 50s, and my sister and I who were in our 30s as well, all in one place, sleeping in the same places that we did.
With you working with your father,
that's
and
right.
Her working with your guys' mother.
Yeah. It was.
That's anything but typical.
Yeah, sure.
It was tense times, man. It was tense times, without a doubt. And I think my sister, she had a tough time dealing with it and such like that. But yeah, it was hard, and but eventually it worked out. My wife and I moved down here. We had our first son, and it worked out. It took some time though. I mean, it was basically, I brought a marketing aspect to it and advertising. The magazine, I thought, was really good. It was like one of those things where build it and they will come was kind of my dad's philosophy of it. Really good, hard-edged journalism, long form, talking about business, but not making it entertaining and fun. Yeah. And as he's always said, anything's a business, right? For the most part. And they always have stories. They always have some really good stories.
Isn't that true?
Yeah. We essentially, we had a good product, right? But in terms of marketing it and really selling it, we had I saw some places where we could do some easy, promotion, trades with other, media entities, maybe find some other ways to get the magazine out to people as opposed to print, because we're still very reliant on that. And I think that kind of helped us to get to where we are today.
I love that. I mean, this is such an anything but typical story, but so you're 11 years old when you're up in New York right?
That's right.
It's at Columbia. So, it's like Are we a product of our DNA or our environment?
Yes.
Maybe
The
a little
answer
both.
is yes.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because that stuff formulated, and just having to adapt and overcome all those times of moving and switching schools,
Right.
and being like the new kid, and and different. I mean, Charlotte is exactly like Miami, only different.
Well, yeah, yeah, way different. Yeah, without
It's
a doubt.
exactly like it, only different. I mean, all of that adaptation was really critical. You had to for survival, but the print world has been that too.
Yeah,
It's changed.
media has changed. I mean,
Big time.
what we're dealing with now is, we still have great content, which is such a wonderful thing to have. I look at other companies that don't produce content, and they struggle for it in many ways. But we have tons of it. I mean, we have it. We have stuff that goes online. We have stuff that goes in the magazine, and we have podcasts and and videos.
Yeah.
That we can put out there. The key question that we're dealing with in media right now is, how do we take all this content and put it out into various different forms of format? Print is still available, but there are podcasts, and then you can do it in video. But there's also digital, ways to do it as well. What's the audience, and there's so many different audiences. How we consume media right now is so, I've never seen anything like it in my life. So it's really hard for us to kind of gauge what's the best place to go here.
Yep.
So what we always decide is we need to probably put it out everywhere for the most part,
and not
right?
know where.
And you have some things that can gauge how it works. But the problem is that in the media age right now, we still only have about the same number of people working with us, right? Or maybe even in some cases, your newspapers are smaller.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
what we do is we wear a lot of different hats, and we know how to, okay, let me send this out through LinkedIn, to this group,
Yeah.
and I know how to write to these people. But I'm also going to send it out on Instagram, and that's a little different as well. One person's got to learn that. And quite frankly, most media companies don't have, they probably do, but don't have a social media person that's designated for it. It's someone that's another
Right.
part of their job.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is a great thing to have if you're looking for a media person, because they can do anything. They're like a Swiss Army knife, Jack.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But at the same time, when they're working at media companies, there's just a lot of things to do. You know what I mean, when you're doing it as well. But getting it out there is the interesting time.
I'm curious about your passion zones. You could do a lot of things. I mean, history is very interesting. Ad sales is one thing. Publishing is a completely different thing. I mean, you are really running a company as a publisher.
Right.
You've seen various, roles in your career. How have the passions either stayed the same or morphed across those roles? And talk about what you really love doing.
I think, and this is interesting because I never thought I was going to get into it. It's always I feel like I fell into a lot of stuff. Or I did something because I needed to help somebody. First, when we talk about when I came down to become general manager and later publisher, that was just to help the family business, right?
Yeah.
I didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go help and see where it goes. So, and then there's other times when I just found out I had to do something. And I was like, hey, I like to do this. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed doing that I didn't come into this to do at all was actually creating content, was writing. So, and doing podcasts and things like that. So I guess maybe 10 years ago, probably, we do a daily newsletter called the Daily Digest, which is at your fingertips, everything that's happening across the state. Short, sweet, succinct, one scroll, and you know what's happening. You don't have to, scroll and get carpal tunnel after just reading one email, right?
Yeah.
So what this was just basically aggregated news from across the state, and we did it. 10 years ago, we were purchased by the media company the family that owned the News Observer way back in the day, and one of the things they kind of looked at what we were doing, and for the most part, they stayed out of our business. That's why I agreed to stay on, and allow me to keep doing what I was doing. But they did, had suggestions. They were media folks, and the president, David Warnoff, said to me, he said, Ben, you need to, basically this Daily Digest is good, but what you should do is have an introduction from each one of your editors to kind of talk about what's on their mind or whatever and things like that. And you should probably do it too. And I was like, okay. I said, well, here's what I want. I'll do it, but I'm not going to talk about business, man. Unless, I might mention it a little bit if we have an event or something like that. I'll promote, right? But I'm just going to talk about what's on my mind. And,
I love it.
And he was like, absolutely do it. You know what I mean? I said, okay, well, here's what we're doing. And so I'd write about, on and it was Fridays. So it was just one day a week, Friday. I was like, nobody wants to talk about,
right,
economy, and stuff like that. So let's do this. I'll just write, whatever happened to this candy bar? Do people still eat Chunkies anymore? You know what I mean? Those kind of things.
Right.
Just write an introduction about it to a business audience of around 20,000, what we call movers and shakers.
Yeah.
And then I said, I'm going to end it with something I'm listening to every week. I love music, and I just said, I'm going to do, here's what I'm listening to this week, or here's something really cool video I found, and enjoy it. Man, it took off, and the feedback has just been great, and that's what I love. Is like I went to an Economic Developers Association statewide meeting last week, and somebody saw my name tag, walked up and just go, man, I love what you're putting out there in terms of that music. We're right on for most of the times and stuff like that. To have that feedback and that engagement with the niche audience that our magazine's trying to target, and not really for the reasons that we're a niche magazine,
Right, exactly.
is priceless. And that really, that might be an ego thing, such, but I just like really touching people and engaging with them and stuff like that. And if I can, connecting them, so that's kind of what, turns me on, so to speak.
Well, that point at the end of being able to connect with this niche audience about something that is not that niche itself, right, is extremely valuable just in business in general, because now you cross the business realm into a personal connection.
Right.
There's more trust that comes along with it. They're looking forward to things coming out from you. So it just brings an entirely different dynamic to your readers. And I'm sure that creates loyalty along the way.
Yeah. You guys know this better than anybody. I think that connecting people when it's not really in your business interest or your self-interest.
Correct.
It's something that I've been doing a lot. And I've learned that just because I've known so many people and make so many connections. I can like go, oh, you should talk to this person. You should talk to this person. And when you see them, get together and make something happen, it's really special,
It's fun.
Yeah, it really is fun. And that's enjoyable as well. And that's where the value comes, I think, as well.
Yeah. So you get into that position, kind of forced into it, right? But talk to us about now continuing forward. What were you trying to do, if anything, once you got into that general manager position and you were like, okay, I enjoy this side of the business, you've settled in. As your career was progressing, did you have a path you were trying to go down, or was it more of, I'm going to fall into this accidentally?
No, it was essentially what I ended up doing was, how can I put this? I always think of myself as this. There's this movie called Airport. An old ones. Remember, Airplane was based on. It was always these. They had all these airport movies in the 70s.
Yeah,
and it was like this plane. Something happens. This plane when it's in the air, and they have to bring it down. Just like it's funny. There was this actor named George Kennedy. I don't know if you remember him, but he was in a bunch of old movies back in the day. But in this movie Airport, he was like the guy that was on the ground that had the cigar in his mouth, and it was like, all right, the plane's going to crash. What are you going to do about, saving? He goes, we're going to get this out here. We're going to get this out here. We're going to get these fire engines out here and get these hose lines out here and such. He was kind of a fix-it guy. And I've always looked at my position as that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not only just kind of answering questions and things like that and trying to provide some answers as best I could, but also in a way that I also have fix things in terms of having people come talk to me and kind of be a sounding board for folks and things like that. And I think that's worked out pretty well. So it's having a path. I hate to say this, but in many ways in our media and it's also small business, as well. You got to kind of react to things in a thoughtful way. Reacting to things in a thoughtful way is really difficult to do. It's easier if you're in a small business because you can kind of move pretty quickly. Big companies, a little bit more difficult.
That's right.
Than that.
Yep.
But yeah, it's just kind of being there for folks. My philosophy in terms of that is, in terms of being a leader, I guess would be hire the best people that can make their own decisions and give them, help them out as best they can and give them support. There's a double-edged sword to that, because I've made some mistakes in terms of hiring folks who have needed to have a resume to tell me what to do, and here's what I need, checks and balances, and that does not work for me as well. And we've paid a price for it, as well. But finding the right people, you can find those right people and give them the freedom to do what they want to do, and the flexibility as well, I think is key.
I'm curious, with all of not that any of us have a typical upbringing, because none of us do, but what you have described with that many moves and all that's atypical, right? Which is cool. A lot of times I find, just kind of looking for patterns with people, they are either driven by what was painful for them. So they're like, they overcorrect, or I don't know that it's overcorrecting, but they pendulum swing to really deal with that. Or it's because they just find so much joy in it that they just naturally do that. I'm curious for your journey, with you being such a connector and fixer and curious, and you've done a lot of these interesting things. Is it driven more by, did you have experiences of loneliness, or people didn't care, or was it more like, no, I feel, genuinely like this has been a fun thing? I'm curious.
Maybe survival.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because Gen X, my generation is like kind of, we call it the latchkey kids. And once again, when I'm sitting there or trying to get to sleep, and I'm thinking, when did I start walking by myself to school? Without like second grade. And I wasn't alone. There's a lot of folks that do that. Your parents were working, and you basically got done with school, and you came home and unlocked the door and sat down and watched cartoons all afternoon until your mom came home, cooked dinner, right? I mean, that's what we did.
Yeah.
And it was not an issue. But, that was a little bit different for young Ben Kinney and, walking down Morningside Drive in New York City in 1980. I still had to do the same thing. And so it was kind of like, okay, I gotta keep my eyes open, right?
Yeah.
And plan for what's happening here and stuff like that. And believe me, I've had some tough times, without a doubt. But that, I don't know if that's still, and just anywhere, if you go to a new school, you got to be on your guard a little bit, because, this also, Gen X is the age, I think, the ripe age of bullying, right? Just anybody that's new, or anything like that, that's a target, right? And so constantly know, look, I'm going to be a target. So how do we get out of this a little bit, or those things? Looking back on that, and that's still, and even going into business, I always thought about that. Okay, where are we here? What's the next big thing coming here as well? So when we learned our lesson during the Great Recession back in 2008, 2009, we were the coal in the canary mine, and that instinct to survive kicked in pretty quickly for us, because the first thing to go, let's think about it, is advertising and
big
business
time.
Expenditure. You can be the best sales rep in the world and go into an office and go, here's the pitch, and they're like, well, I could either lay off an employee or buy your advertising. You can't really make that argument, right?
Correct.
And this was happening all the time during COVID. I mean, we had some major advertisers, Backpage, Full Color, pull out, because they're like, look, you don't know what's going to happen here. You know what I mean? This is something we've never seen before. How do you prepare for that? What do you do? We got lean and mean for one, but at the same time, you can't cut your way out of that. We had to come up with new products. That's when we really started enhancing our digital offerings. That's when we really started to, cater special publications to certain organizations that, had money, maybe that were government funded, that we could work out. So that survival instinct, I think, is what's really kind of kept me going.
It's interesting to hear you talk about that, because we've had a few episodes talking about same type thing during COVID, right? You get something thrown at you. You only have two options. One is to lean in and figure it out, and the others lean back, and you're not going to have a business at the end of it.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm curious, during that time, how were you able to keep the morale of the staff engaged and looking towards the future in a time like that? Because it's tough to be creative when you're backed into a corner. So if you're trying to come up with solutions and people think the business's head is on the chopping block, that culture is going to be crucial.
Yeah, it was, it was funny because I think a lot of people were scarred by the recession because there was a lot more, it seems like there were a lot more layoffs that were happening during that time, especially in our business, as opposed to COVID. When COVID hit, a lot of folks came and said, our team came together. A lot of folks said, what can we do?
Yep.
And it just doesn't happen. I'm just not going to put out content and such. Do you need help doing this? Do you need help doing this? We created a new a daily newsletter to talk about that, and we got sponsored for it and stuff. So everybody kind of came together, and we were small enough that it wasn't, we did okay. We actually made it through that very well, I thought, considering, which when it first hit, we didn't. Let me twist something a little bit and tell you how we kind of helped some folk help. I was doing something else at the same time, which is insane. So the year of 2020, in January, immediately, I was elected to become president of North Carolina State's Alumni Association, which was great. I was served on the board, and it was, it was a great honor to be able to do that. And, that's basically meeting the board, which is, oh gosh, I don't know, 40 folks, getting together, a couple times a year at NC State, and organizing all this kind of stuff, face-to-face meetings, all these kinds of great things and such. Well, COVID hits, and I become the COVID president, which was, really tough. And and no one knew what was going to happen in terms of that. So one of the things I implemented very quickly was we need to get in touch with every one of our, folks who are on the board, and have monthly phone calls with them just to talk. How you doing? How's your business doing? And, because we know that first and foremost, these people are thinking about their families. These people are thinking about their companies that they're working at. The association board's important, but it's not not top of the list, right? So we want to make sure that they know we're here and that we're taking care of things and things are going that way. Well, and we all had to do that on a screen. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So everything that we did was via Zoom, which was really hard to do because normally what we would go to graduation ceremonies. I would speak at one of those things and stuff like that, and none of that was happening. You know what I mean? So you had to make the best of it via a screen. So it was really tough to do that. And fortunately, we made it through, really well. People stayed together, and everybody was really, really engaged anyway. But it was a real challenge for us because we didn't know, what's going to happen. Are we going to have meetings anymore?
Right.
Is this going to be happening the whole time and things like that? So, yeah, that was a really interesting time doing that as well. But balancing that as well as balancing the magazines and SouthPark as well was a really crazy time as well. Yeah. So, yeah, it was just a juggling act. But once again, survival mode.
That's it.
Yep.
That was really what I was looking for. Like, what was that thread? And when you were in New York, 1980, right?
Mm-hmm.
A year or so?
No, just about like 8 months.
Okay.
It was just a semester.
Okay. Well, but still, I think my first time in New York was like 1985. No. It was 87 or 88. And subway murders were at a peak. We've had other people, Hell's Kitchen and, Brooklyn, like tough. It was like Lebanon, in some cases, war torn. That's, fairly traumatic, where you've got to be that street smart. And as a kid, that's pretty amazing. But you keep smiling. You still have a smile on your face. You have a zest for life.
Yeah.
Which the cool thing is I think you're a great example of, hey, I can go through trauma and I can either allow it to kill me or I can allow it to make me better.
Yeah.
And there's an empathy that you have there too, which that's where I kind of went with that question, because a lot of times where we have our greatest empathy comes from some of our greatest struggles.
Yeah, I've been there.
Correct.
Yeah. You know, something funny. It's one thing that you're talking about with like folks. It's just, I guess being alive for, you know, getting older and such is very funny, because it's like perspective is so hilarious in terms of, you know, you hear people talk today about New York City, just that it's so terrible, and just the stuff on the subways, the people getting yelled at and stuff like that. And I want to go, when I was a kid, 1979, 1980, New York City, there was a guy called the Subway Slasher who essentially would wait on the subway, and then, as he was getting off, would pull out a meat cleaver. I kid you not. It's on the news if you look it up, and like try and cut people as he left. It was going on for like 2 or 3 weeks on the news, right? You just see it on your local news. The Subway Slasher has struck again. I'm thinking, that's scary compared to what you're dealing with. Yeah, sure, I'm sure what's going on is scary. I'm sure stuff happens and such, but it's not like things are any worse than they were now. You know what I mean? So you got to laugh a little bit. I did a guy for a podcast of mine. He's a boomer, and I, you know, kind of said, "Are things really? What do you think about things being bad?" You know, perspective. He goes, "Man, I grew up in 1968." He's like, "You know, there were riots like you would not believe back in the day. You know, for all different reasons.
Kent State.
Yeah, war was going on.
Yeah.
You know, people were doing that." He goes, "I look now at it now, and it's not even, you know, half as bad."
Sure.
And I remember, guys. I remember when we had the first Great Recession. I saw my grandmother had an event. And she still lived in Burlington. But I had an event at Elon University, and I stopped to say hello before I went to go do it. And I was like saying, this recession's killing us. We don't know if we're going to be able to, you know, meet payroll and stuff like that. She goes, "Well, do me a favor. Let me see the bottoms of your shoes." And I said, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Let me see the bottoms of your shoes." I showed them to her. She goes, "You ain't got no holes in them." She goes, "We used to put cardboard in the bottoms of our shoes back during the Great Depression.
Yeah.
You know, you think you got it bad now, you know, keep that in mind." And it kind of humbled me a little bit. And I thought, you know what, I'm not going to whine as much about this and start doing something about it.
Yep.
That perspective is really powerful. You know, the fact that we had grandparents that lived through the dirty 30s, the Depression, World War II.
Yep.
You know, I mean, and just in your business, I would say that the advertising business and the newspaper business and, you know, the journalism business has seen tremendous changes since 2000, big time, you know, .com boom and bust. Then 2008, 09, that was tough, a Great Recession. COVID, another one, you know, and the continuation now with AI, which is throwing a lot of stuff. But I remember Ray Shaw would say content is king. Local, you know, the business journals. And it was funny because we were semi-competitors, I mean, in some ways. And yet there was a great respect. Like, Ray had a respect for good journalism. He had a disdain for gimmicks and shoddiness.
Yeah.
Like, he was buttoned up and he didn't suffer fools. But journalistic integrity was very, very high. And I still think that quality and content is king. Yeah, you could, like, I could go on to LinkedIn right now and I could say, yeah, that was probably AI generated.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, but even what you said, like what you like doing on your Fridays, where it was like, hey, chunky candy bars still thing or not? You know, like, well, that's kind of funny. And you're not following a prescriptive rule based on, well, hey, this is what survey says.
Right.
And here's where all the data says, so this is where you better stay in line if you want to be. No, you just be yourself.
Yeah. It's genuine.
Yeah. And people are craving authenticity.
Sure are. Now more than ever.
I think so. That's why I like this podcast. I mean, as long as you keep doing it, I'm doing it.
Yeah, man. No, you're right. I think that AI is something that it kind of scares us in the business a little bit, obviously, because non-talented people can put something down and have information out there, but it can't replace storytelling, and that's what we're all doing, is telling stories. I think in our markets right now, I think everybody's trying some very different things. I don't think that there is one rule to follow anymore. That's you know, everyone's doing things people are doing. There's so many digital newsletters coming out. There's so many, that podcasts are coming out right now. It's very important. But the key is be entertaining, be engaging, and have a voice. I think is the key thing that we try to do. And one of the great things I love about business, and I don't want to diss South Park either, because South Park does a really good job of talking about arts and culture in the Charlotte area.
Oh yeah,
we're
it's very well done.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not just advertising jamming you. Like it's you actually enjoy reading it at your leisure.
Exactly.
And it's well done.
Yeah, that's it. And as a matter of fact, the editor of that came from BNC.
Interesting.
Kathy Martin has done a great job with kind of she's not really transferring the magazine. It was a great magazine before we purchased it, but she did a really good job of kind of making it her own, and kind of you see what her vision is. Really good, clean design, really nice photography, And this is the key, and this is something, gentlemen, that we are really missing these days. And this is something I'll give Kathy and David Milderberg, both of them. He's at BNC. Good editing is so hard to find, because I don't know if you'll see this, and AI has kind of helped it out a little bit, but there's people that send emails these days, or anyone that tries to, I'm a writer and stuff like that. A lot of people tend to overwrite.
Yeah,
they get really too much verbiage. You don't need that much.
Yeah,
to get to the point, right?
Yeah.
And that was what my dad was. My dad was a really good reporter, but man, he became an amazing editor. Just a quick story. When I first came on there, these are kind of the things where we butted heads, right? I'd say, Dad, I'm going to send this email out to the staff. Hope that's okay. And then he'd send me something. You ain't sending that out. And that's the worst punctuation, grammar, and stuff I'd ever seen. Send it back. And so it would take me about 4 hours to send out an email telling people to join us for a beer after work.
Yep.
As well. Believe me, that was constant doing that. He did that with everybody. But he really wanted to be succinct, make sense.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and this is where AI gets it wrong, is be engaging and be entertaining. Have that voice. That's a fine line to tread, and a good editor can do that. A good editor can make a great, or it can make a good reporter look great by kind of taking out things, changing a sentence to make it exactly what that person intended to, but it reads a little bit different, which is key. So I think both of our publications do a really good job of that. And I think because of that, that's why BNC's been around for 45 years.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
To have credibility and longevity in a space that is awash with, hey, good idea,
right?
Go print, and then boom, it's gone.
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible.
It's fun. It's hard to do. It's not easy, and you got to find the right people to do it. And I will tell you this day and age, I've had folks, interns, and people that are interested in getting into the business. I want to be a journalist. And I'm like, why? No. So I want to be a journalist. Can you tell me about that? And then basically what we tell them is like, here's the deal. You're not going to get rich.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's right.
You're going to make a living, but you're going to love what you do. You better have a passion for it. And to be able to see your information, your content, your story get out there, and to get that feedback from those folks, like, oh man, I just really appreciate what you wrote. You made my day. Or in terms of business, I went and followed up with that person, and that was a great lead for my business. You know what I mean? That means something, and you get off on that. That makes up for not tunning it. Excuse me, doing PR or something like that.
Right.
Shouldn't say that's mean. I love our PR people, but you know what I mean.
It is funny, the segregation and caste systems, if you will, in every industry.
Right.
In every industry. But I when I went into runbizjournals.com, I didn't know jack squat about journalism. Like, I was like, why me? And I still questioned that for a long time. But what was really interesting, like we knew, and we were in that massive shift of, going from print to where print people thought they were going, by the way, a dodo bird.
Right.
So I'm in hostile territory with publishers that had legitimate fiefdoms and kingdoms in their own respective cities. And then who's this jackleg coming in that doesn't even know, and
Right.
you know, it's .com and gooey eyeballs, right? You know, all that kind of stuff. But what I find very interesting in just listening to some of your story is the editors. So there was definitely the caste system. Like the editors were, you know, Ray Shaw loved, you know, our top editors and all that. Like, you know, and they'd been together for a long freaking time because they knew each other's style. And Ray was never going to sully his reputation by doing some quick hit advertising thing that was going to make him a bunch of money. And he knew how to make money at the book of lists. I mean, that made money.
Man.
That was like a gold mine. But journalistic integrity was a big deal. But like the advertising people kind of disdained. The PR people like, yeah, but it's still about hardcore journalism.
Right.
You know, like there was that thing. But I find it very interesting in some of what you were saying about the editors being so hard to find. To have somebody redline your stuff and go through a 3-hour, you know, grueling process so I could send out an email about join us for beer at the end. I understood. Like Ray was a man of haiku. His emails were extremely precise and pointed. I call him like, here comes haiku Ray. But it takes humility to be able to take what I thought was the opus, and it was, you know, it was brilliant and it should be worthy of some sort of an accolade somewhere, and have somebody redlining it all over the place. Jeffrey Gitomer, who's been on this podcast too, he's talked a lot about that. I mean, he embraced the editing. Not everybody does. Pride typically keeps you from that.
And writers have a pretty big ego for the most time. You know what I mean? This is like their baby. You know,
every word has a purpose.
Yeah.
Right? Especially if you're a writer, that's your art. So
correct.
Every single word has a reason. So now if you start slashing and cutting, the ego can get in the way for sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting process. But it's also, it's messy. Right? You know what I mean? It's a messy process, but beautiful things come from messiness. You know what I mean? It's so, you know, it's funny when, you know, these, you know, like you'll get like a, you know, 4,000 word, you know, story, and you have to cut it into like 2,500, 3,000 words.
Yeah.
Something's got to go because we ain't adding no more pages. Right? And that's kind of how our business is from that standpoint. But a good editor is the one that goes in there and can see exactly what's going to happen and make it fit very well from that standpoint. It's an art form, I think.
Yep. Gary, you were bringing up a really interesting point that, Ben, I'm curious about for you, of the balance between the business side of running a publication versus the tried and true, I'm going to believe the core of the thing we're putting out. How do you balance those two to not neglect either?
It's changed quite a bit. Now, it used to be, we're going to put this news out there, advertising folks, we don't care what you think. Essentially, here's the deal. Here's what's going to go in.
Yep.
Fill it with ads.
Right.
That's it. And the advertising folks back in the day, that was legitimate. You go, hey, we reach this many people, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
You know, put your ad where you'll be seen right here, you know, that kind of stuff. And that was it. That changed 2000 on. And one of the things I did when I came on board was I changed a lot of how we treated our advertisers. You know, I'd go to someone that had never advertised with us, but I knew was a big advertiser, and said, what do you need? What can we do to make this work? And essentially, that's when we started off with, you know, advertising special sections. As long as it was labeled correctly, it could still go in there, but they could tell their story, right? And we gave them the same professional design and photography and all those kinds of things that we would a regular story, just as long as we, you know, the font was different and sit within our parameters, and that worked for a good while. It really helped us out because people were saying, you know what, I don't know what I'm getting out of this. You know what I mean?
That's right.
I'm putting my ad in there, but you know, in business to business advertising especially, it's not like it's coupons in that thing.
No.
You know what I mean? It's like I go, hey, I need me some law service. You know what I mean? That'd be great. No, it's not Yellow Pages. So that changed things how we did. That's how we did. Now, as times got a little tougher and we were dealing with some different things, editorial came along too. Editorial's a lot more open to, talking to advertisers. Maybe not doing a story to them, but if they have a lead, they're much more open to talking. And advertising staff, we don't have two buildings anymore. I got like a loft space now with open desk and such. They're right next, to each other. So it's just changed a little bit. But as long as people know you're not pay for play.
Correct.
If you see hey, this is the best so-and-so in the world. This bank is amazing. The customer service is top notch. And then there's a big ad for the same bank within that. You take it with a grain of salt. We're not going to do that, and we're not going to pull a story. If someone's the biggest advertiser and, their CFO is caught embezzling, we're going to write about that. Sorry, that's news. People need to know that. That's our duty to our readers. First and foremost is our duty to our readers. Advertisers, you're very important, but you're not our first priority. I hate to say that. Sorry. Any advertisers listen, sorry about that.
The pay-to-play thing is a big deal.
Yeah.
And when I had my bubble completely shattered when I found out I'd written a book, and a friend of mine, he had somebody write his book, and he paid $120,000 to have somebody write his book and guarantee that he would be top, of Wall Street Journal best-selling list. I'm like, what? That's pay to play.
No, it literally is, because they take that money and they purchase the books, so
Correct.
It boosts up sales. And then you start showing up on lists, and then hopefully people buy after. But yeah, you're right.
It's crazy. So, and we've talked a lot about integrity with a lot of guests on here.
Yeah, well, it's important. Yeah,
it's what do you got if you don't have that?
Nothing.
You really don't have anything.
Yeah, and what's scary? The scary thing these days, I think, is from a digital standpoint, it's all over the chart now.
Oh, big time.
You know what I mean? I mean, it's really, and you don't even know where it's coming from in terms of who's paying for it.
Yep.
The pay to play, what I was talking about, like that bank and such, at least now, that's kind of the good old days when you knew exactly who was paying for it.
Correct.
Fast forward to now, especially when you're looking at some digital aspects of it, you don't know who's paying for it, and you're getting a message that you don't know, the source.
Is it
legit or not and such. We definitely have to be smart readers, and essentially what we want to do at all of our publications is to not only engage our readers, but to make them a little bit more knowledgeable about, their area around them, the business environment around them, what's going on there, and hopefully they'll recognize that kind of writing.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I'm curious your opinion on this. We're talking about pay to play here, and the younger generations, Gen Z especially, buys a lot of what they do and make a lot of their decisions based off of influencers.
Mm-hmm.
And the pay to play with affiliate links, but now it's getting more and more guerrilla warfare style, where it's just built into their day-to-day stories. I'm curious how more formal publications can compete with that style, as these younger generations have leaned so far into that.
Yeah, it's a challenge, and I'm looking more to SouthPark, in terms of what we're doing there. Our demographic's a little older from that standpoint. It's essentially we try to find as many ways as we can to make our product not acceptable, but just how can I put this? Make our product more attractive to many different audiences and different genders. So we do a lot of different things as well. And I'll be honest with you, we have a TikTok channel.
Yeah.
We got to do it, from that standpoint. But the challenge is not being able to just overly appeal to them and stuff like that as well. And sometimes we're just not going to be able to do it.
Right.
But it's a challenge. I also think of this, and this is we've always had this, the business North Carolina has always appealed to this kind of 45 to 65-year-old executive. Way back in the day, it was mostly male. Thank goodness it's changed, so it's gotten to be more 50-50. But it's still that savvy kind of person that wants to spend some time with us, find out about a company, get in depth, right? We're not going to beat you on the headlines. That's what I said when we win against the business trolls. They're going to kill us when it comes to breaking news. We can't do it. But we're going to take one of those stories from breaking news and break it down.
Go deep.
Yeah. So we always had this worry. It was like, oh, how do we reach the 20 so and so year olds? How does this magazine do that? I've always been like, do you want to?
Yeah.
Right.
You're kind of losing your niche then. I think that's one of what the downfalls of newspapers did.
Yeah.
Was they were like, we got to reach everybody. I was like, oh, you're gonna wear yourself out doing that, which in many ways they did. So we want to be able to have something. If someone does want to come to us from a different media channel like TikTok or something like that, they can. We'll give them access to get a little taste. But we're not going to change the content to do that. I think that's kind of going a downward spiral.
I agree
as well.
Yep. Yeah. No, I love that perspective, because you trying to get the 25-year-old now, well, they're going to turn into that 45-year-old
right?
Exactly.
that you want. They're your target audience.
Yeah, they're going to want to say, "Oh my gosh," and I hate to say, my dad got that. You know what I mean? I'm going to check that out when you get to a certain age.
Yep.
Well, Wall Street Journal has been kind of the same thing.
I think they've done a good job, don't you?
I do too.
Yeah, yeah.
They've stayed relevant.
Yeah, and even let's be honest, even many people hate it, but the New York Times has done a really good job, I think, of kind of finding different ways to engage with people. I mean, look at all the games that they have now.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And people love that thing. And they're not talking about, the New York Times, big newspaper. They think, oh, Wordle's awesome.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, we'll do sometimes in the evenings, we'll do like the crossword and things like that, just to be engaged and be doing something different.
It's not anymore. It's not anymore a publication or a magazine. It's a brand.
Yep.
So that's kind of the key things I think a lot of folks need to do if you want to get into that. And I think on a small scale, I think we've done that with Business North Carolina. We're doing it with SouthPark, as a matter of fact. We kind of took the model that we did with Business North Carolina, was create a really good quality magazine. This is way back in the day that people trust. And then we started to build things around it, which were like, okay, let's try this Daily Digest. Let's try this podcast. Let's try this, under the Business North Carolina brand. And SouthPark's coming along that way as well. We kind of took it and made it, let's enhance this magazine a little bit. So we want it to be on every coffee table, in Charlotte.
And it really is.
Yeah, well, mission accomplished, right, Gary? Well, next is what we want to do is, how do we do different things with it? How can we do events?
That was where I was going to go next. That's the next thing, because that was one of the things that I saw the genius of Ray again, where he was doing Book of Lists, but then we're doing 40 under 40 events, and did he monetize that?
Killed it.
But and in my personal bias at this point, I'm like, I don't really want to do another event night with Rubber Chicken, or better than Rubber Chicken with and everybody's dressed up in tight shoes and whatever, and like, hey, congratulate.
Yeah,
there's something about that, but I think the bigger thing is connectivity.
Right,
you got it.
Like, if we can find meaningful ways to connect each other, and you talked about this earlier in the podcast, you love connecting.
Yeah,
and I think that's where we have to keep driving, and that's what we're really even trying to do with this thing too.
It is.
It's awesome. So for BNC, what we've been doing is we don't do as many as the business journals.
Well,
it's
maybe overkill.
It's impossible. It is impossible. But we do feel that we want to get that brand out in statewide events that kind of fit our niche a little bit.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we do about 3 or 4. We do a manufacturing conference every year called MFG Con that just is great, and we just bring people to the table who are allies of manufacturing in North Carolina, and folks that are on the plant floor, and just it really has worked well for us. It's a very largely attended event, which is great. This is funny. So we also do some other ones. We do like a North Carolina Rural Economic Summit. We also do a leadership course. After the success of the MFG Con, we had these other ones, and they weren't as big. We were bringing in probably about 150, 175 folks, which was nice, to different places across the state. And we weren't in Raleigh, we weren't in Charlotte. We were going to places like Hickory, Greenville, North Carolina, and such. And what we noticed was the quality of the people, the people that were actually attending. These were movers and shakers. These were leaders in North Carolina. And the content, man, the things they were talking about, the engagement was just amazing. And people coming out of them going, wow, that was really serious, great discussion. That made us feel like we're on the right track. So we kind of got into the feeling that we're going to do well with these. We're going to get some sponsorships. We're going to get the attendees and stuff like that. But what we're really doing is making this really cool connection with people who matter, and to have people come to you and go, man, that thing you went last year was just amazing. The quality of that panel discussion on whatever was really good stuff. So we kind of took that as that's what our mantra is going to be now. We're going to do this thing where you're going to come out of that and going, I'm putting that on my calendar for next year.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the rest is going to follow.
It'll follow,
right?
yeah.
Which has kind of been the theme for the last 15 minutes or so. If you put the right things out, it's going to attract the right people, and it's going to make the business successful.
Yeah, exactly.
Love it. Ben, thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah, this is good.
There's a lot here, and I love being able to use anything but typical, to be a little punny, anything but typical industries and how they apply to overarching business and entrepreneurship in general. And this is no different.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you
awesome.
so
Well,
much.
thanks, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Where can we send people to check you out or check the businesses out?
So our two magazines, and I failed to mention, we also do the North Carolina Tribune. That's a newsletter that we created that's all about statewide political news and how it affects business. But you can find our two main sites. You can go to businessnc.com, and that's got everything we have on there from the magazine, and SouthParkMagazine.com, which is everything about arts and culture in Charlotte.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and I would be remiss if I didn't say, hit that like button, smash it hit their sites. And when we get this thing up on YouTube and all the other places that we're at, give us a like, subscribe us. So thank you so much. Ben, you guys rock.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.